Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Hello, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here. All the information on love and abuse is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being. Like I said, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad that you're taking an opportunity to listen to this show because I think it's important to understand how we communicate with people can really make a difference in how we live our lives. And, one of the things I talk about is avoiding or at least learning how to get through toxic communication. Somebody who is toxic, somebody who is unhealthy, how to get through that toxic communication in a way that doesn't make you crawl back into your shell. If you can communicate with someone in a way where you're coming from a stronger, more confident place inside you, then you don't have to crawl back into your shell. Now, I know this can't work with everyone. Some people are dangerous. I felt like I had to crawl into my shell when I was living at home when I was younger. My stepfather drank alcohol and became aggressive. I had to crawl back into that shell, and that shell consisted of many things. Inside me, there's fear, so I want to protect myself because I am fearful. And how do I do that? It's a mental and emotional blockade that I put up, that you may put up in certain circumstances. It's also my environment. I sheltered myself in my bedroom. I hoped and prayed and just wished that he would stop drinking or get sober tonight so I could have a good night's sleep without fear. And it took a toll on me, just like any abusive situation, any scary situation like that. Any traumatic situation like that takes a toll on you. How does it take a toll? Because you crawl back into your shell. And this is what happens. This isn't the only reason, but one of the things that happens is we don't want to expose ourselves to the trauma, to the radiation, as I sometimes call it, the relationship radiation, because we don't want to get sicker. And if we get any sicker, we're not going to be able to survive. So in order to survive, we have to put on that emotional armor. We have to crawl into our shell like a turtle and protect ourselves so that we are not in the danger zone. And this can be a fantastic place to protect yourself. But what ends up happening is that you end up going there so often that you start to close out the people in the outside world. You start to close out your love and connection and your trust and just being able to find happiness. I remember when I was married, my wife did this. I was not the best husband, and she was starting to close off in the last 4 years of our marriage. She started closing off, closing down, and I had no idea it was me. I had no idea. I just thought, wow, she hasn't had a job in a while, and when she gets a job, she doesn't like it, or she can't stay there, or she doesn't get the job, and she's depressed, and that's what was happening. She was getting more and more depressed and losing her passion for life. And so I remember those times, and I don't feel good at all about how I showed up in my marriage. And, this is one of the reasons I come on the air and tell you, don't do this. Don't do this if you're the person doing the bad behavior. And if you're the person receiving the bad behavior, this is what I'm saying today. Don't crawl into your shell all the time, because every time you crawl into your shell, you either unwillingly or inadvertently become tolerant and more resilient of bad behavior. And again, that's probably not your intention, but what happens is you start to accept bad behavior as your new normal, as the way it is, and just the way this relationship is going. So you just think, well, I'll just get through this until the next good moment. And then the next good moment comes as it always does, because there's a reason I call this show Love and Abuse. It's the cycle. Someone loves you, and then they abuse you, and then they love you, and then they abuse you. Very traumatic. But when you get through the abuse, in whatever form it comes, could be verbal, could be psychological, emotional, could be a lot of mind games, could be a lot of control, could be a lot of guilting. When you finally get through that, you're seeking any sliver of kindness and respect from the other person. You're seeking any sliver of love and support from the other person. And someone who is emotionally abusive knows how to give you love and support for a while and then take it away by being controlling and manipulative and deceptive and all the things that you don't want in your life. And you just wish and hope and pray that they don't do that anymore. But the cycle continues. The pattern continues. And so what do? Just like I said, sometimes you crawl back into your shell. And what does that mean? That means there are people out there that see what's going on, hear what's going on, and they don't want that in their life. It's like I told a client yesterday. I said, I want you to honor yourself to the point where when you see bad stuff happening in your life, when somebody is doing something bad, being emotionally abusive, being controlling or manipulative, you look at that situation, you step out of yourself and you look at that situation and you say, I don't want that in my life. I don't want that behavior. I don't want that person to treat me that way. I don't deserve that. I deserve love. I deserve kindness. I deserve respect. I deserve someone who's going to treat me as if they actually love me. I don't need that in my life, and I won't allow it in my life. I mean, really try that on. I won't allow that behavior in my life. I won't do it. That's how worthy you have to see yourself. That's how worthy you have to feel about yourself. That you will not tolerate that behavior. That you won't allow anyone to mistreat you or disrespect you. Because you don't want to crawl back into your shell. Crawling back into your shell means that you either don't want to deal with it, you can't deal with it, you don't have the tools to deal with it, you don't know how to deal with it, or even if you dealt with it, you don't want to deal with the repercussions of dealing with it. You don't want to deal with that person's behavior, their cunningness, their manipulation, their control. You don't want to deal with any of that stuff. So you crawl back into your shell, and what happens, you end up staying with someone or being around someone that mistreats you, and you're right back in the clutches of emotional abuse and manipulation again. And when you continue that cycle, the traumatic bonding takes place where you almost start to equate love with abuse and abuse with love, and you start to not be able to tell the difference. So you bond to the person waiting for them to be nicer, and then you feel good because they're nicer, and then you feel bad because they're not nice again, but then you spend your time in that bad space waiting for the good to happen again. And you really put yourself through that. I know sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you feel locked in. Sometimes you feel committed. Sometimes there are other things at play. But where I really want you to go, no matter what, even if you think you have no choice, no options, what I really want you to do and where I really want you to go is, and you can do this physically, put your hands on your chest and say, I am worthy of better behavior. I deserve better behavior. I am protecting this person, this body, this mind, this heart. I will protect this person I am. I do not deserve that behavior. And really feel that. Really soak that in. Because even if you don't know what to say or how to get through the argument or how to get through the day, you have to know this about yourself. You have to believe this about yourself. In emotional abuse, what ends up happening is you stop believing in yourself. You stop trusting yourself. Your decision-making ability goes haywire. Your ability to figure out what's true and what's not goes haywire. You get so confused. And a lot of that can be the gaslighting from someone else, where they are making you crazy. It can be just the fact that they are loving you and then they're abusing you or treating you badly. It can be a number of things, but what ends up happening is when you have someone in your life that doesn't focus on themselves but focuses on changing you, you become a wreck. There's no better way to put it, maybe. You just become a wreck. Every aspect of your life is altered and affected. And what's interesting is that the person controlling you thinks that's love, thinks that's the best way to get happiness. That may not always be true, but that's often true. The person that wants to control, that wants to manipulate, that wants to emotionally abuse you thinks that's love. And because they think that's love, your experience of love changes because maybe they were so nice when you first met. I remember when I met my wife, and I talk about myself on this show a lot because I have a perspective from both sides of this. I have been in minor emotionally abusive situations, some major emotionally abusive situations, and I've also been emotionally abusive. We can all be emotionally abusive. We all have the capability to do the behaviors of emotional abuse. It's just that we hear the word abuse and we think, oh, it's so awful, abuse. We just think of the worst suffering that somebody could go through. But emotional abuse is a real thing. It's an abuse of your emotions. It's an abuse of your kindness, of your caring, of your compassion, and it's an abuse of your heart. So we all have the capability of doing this once in a while. It's when it becomes a pattern that it's a problem. And it became a pattern in my life for many, many years. Every relationship I've ever had, I've lost until the one I'm in now, which is amazingly successful because I've stopped being abusive, because I've stopped doing the behavior, not because I just stopped. It was because I had a revelation inside of me that all my focus was on someone else changing for me. As soon as I came up with that thought that, oh my God, I'm trying to change my wife, I'm trying to change her, no wonder she's getting so depressed. No wonder she is falling out of love with me, or at that time has fallen out of love with me. No wonder that happened. I would fall out of love with someone who was always trying to control me. I would. I mean, we have to admit that to ourselves. If someone is trying to control us, we don't want to love them. It's hard. We don't want to love someone who's trying to control us. We love people who want to help us, genuinely, not help us by telling us what to do, but really just be there for us, have a shoulder for us to cry on. We love people who support our path, support our happiness. That's how it works, and that's how it's supposed to work, in my opinion. Love is supporting the other person's happiness, supporting the other person's journey, and letting them be who they are without us telling them who they're supposed to be or what they're supposed to do. And that's a scary prospect for anyone that's ever been on the other side of this, where they have been trying to control the person that they're with. We want to change someone else's behavior so that they'll show up better for us by our standards, by our values. And when we throw that down on someone else, it becomes restrictive. It feels like there's a puppet and a puppeteer. I'm going to control you, and you have no say. And if you say anything about what I'm trying to do to control you, then I'm going to pull this string, and I'm going to make you feel bad, and I'm going to pull this string, and you're not going to get any love from me because I'm going to be giving you the silent treatment, and I'm going to pull this string so that you continue to feel guilty until you finally comply with what I want, or at least get close to complying with what I want, so that I show you love again. I mean, yes, I hate saying it, but that's what happens. There's this game that is played that manipulators will do. They'll play the game until there's compliance. Anyway, let me get back to what I was going to say. When I met my wife, I was so nice. I mean, I can look at my behavior, and this is how every one of my relationships began. I was one of the most amazing people that they ever met. I'm not saying this from ego. I'm saying this because I knew how to show up in order to be impressive. And the way I showed up was just doing all the behaviors that you hear about emotionally abusive people, where at the beginning of a relationship, they will love bomb you. They will give you compliments. They will say that you're the most amazing person in the world. They will say that you're a soulmate, and you'll feel that and you'll love it because it feels so right. And that's how I showed up. I would love bomb. I would compliment. I would tell them how wonderful they are. And I would listen very carefully to what they wanted for their life and try to fulfill that. And, I didn't know it was toxic behavior back then. I wasn't showing up as myself. I was showing up in a way that made them think that I was perfect for them. So I did that to about 4 or 5 women in my life. I mean, those were my relationships, and those were the ones I've ruined, and not proud of that, but to look back and see my behavior now, that was a different guy. That was a different person. I don't like that guy. I love me, but I don't like that guy. And the way I showed up back then is completely different than the way I show up now, which is, like I was saying earlier, supporting the person I'm with, supporting their happiness, supporting their hobbies, their dreams, their ambitions, but not in a manipulative way where it appears that I am this supportive person, but I am actually a supportive person. And I did this with my wife. When I met her, I was catering to her every need. I was taking care of her. I was telling her how amazing she was right from the get-go. I mean, I really was doing some of the classic early signs of emotional abuse. Again, I didn't know I was doing it, so try not to be too hard on me. But I was doing these things, and after about 2-3 months, I started getting more comfortable in the relationship, started settling down into the relationship. And then my true character was coming out. I was still a kind, generous person in many ways, but I had emotionally abusive behaviors that I had never healed from and didn't even know they existed because I thought everyone else needed to change and I was fine. I'm perfect. Why would I want to change? So that was how my marriage went. I'm okay. You're not. I'm fine. You have a problem. That was my perspective. That was my viewpoint. And so I was very judgmental. I wasn't verbally abusive, but I would be very manipulative in ways to make her feel guilty. That was my specialty. If you want to call it a negative superpower, that was my superpower, is causing her to feel guilty. And that's just an awful, awful thing to do to anyone, because how crappy does guilt feel? Guilt is one of the most awful feelings. And if you are constantly in that guilt state because you have someone that's doing that to you, this is the important part. You have to look at yourself as worthy and lovable and know that you don't deserve that treatment. And I treated my wife like that for several years. And she would say that much of our relationship was great, but it all falls apart when you have this toxic element in it and it won't go away, and it causes the other person to close their heart and causes them to feel depressed in their own life. It depresses everything going on in their life. So my wife became more and more depressed until one day, and it's a long story, but one day she said, I don't think I want to be married anymore. And that was a shocker to me because my ego kicks in. Why wouldn't you want to be married to me? I'm great. I'm good for you. And all these unhealthy thoughts, very narcissistic thoughts. And she said, I'm just not in love with you anymore. And so, I went through the pain, I went through the hurt, and I cried, and we ended up, separating and not seeing each other anymore. And it was the worst pain imaginable. At the same time, it was the perfect opportunity for me to heal. There's more to that story. I share it in other episodes, but we went through a separation, and during that separation, I had that revelation. I finally had the understanding that I was spending so much damn time focused on her and what she needs to do to make this relationship better, that I gave no consideration that I might be the problem. I might be the common denominator for all the problems in my relationships over these years. She needed to kick my butt like that. She needed to do the proverbial hands to the chest saying, I am worth more than the way you're treating me. I am lovable and you are not loving me. I say this on every episode, I deserve kindness. I deserve respect. I deserve to have my own thoughts, my own ideas. I deserve someone who actually supports the path and journey that I'm on and doesn't want me to conform to their standards. I deserve that. That's what my wife, I'm putting words in her mouth, of course. But if I was in her shoes, this is exactly how I'd feel. I wouldn't want to be on those puppet strings. I wouldn't want to have those dirty looks given to me. I wouldn't want to experience the judgments that my partner was putting on me and continuing to feel down about myself and bad about myself. I had to learn that by her leaving me. It had to kick me in the butt that this relationship was another failure in my life. And if I don't learn my lesson now, every single relationship from this point on was going to be another failure. And so the emotional abuser has to come to this place inside them where they say, I am so focused on other people, on controlling them. I'm so focused on controlling my environment. I'm so focused on making everybody change for me. And I don't think I have a problem, that maybe that's the problem. Maybe I'm stuck in this box of thinking and I can't get out of it because I don't know any other way. I don't know any other way to think. I don't know any other way to act. All I know is that when I control people and can make them conform to what I want them to be and what I want them to do, I finally get what I want and then I'm happy. Some people think like this and they don't even know they're thinking like this. It's just natural for them. But when I learned that, when I finally discovered one of the most ultimate truths in my relationships was that I spent so much time judging other people that I forgot to look inward and figure out, wait, if I don't like what they're doing, then I need to focus on myself and what I want in my life. And that was a huge turning point for me as well. I spent so much time judging other people that I forgot to focus on what I wanted for me. And because I wasn't focused on me, I was focused on them having to change for me. You have to change for me, so I'm happy. That's toxic. That is unhealthy. And I say this knowing that there are probably people being emotionally triggered right now on both sides. There are people that have done this and they go, oh my God, that's me. I do that now. Or I've done that so often. I'm screwing up in my life. I got to stop doing that. And then there are the victims of emotional abuse who have experienced that from someone like the way I used to be. I know there's some emotional triggers going on out there, and it might be hard to hear from someone who's done that. Like, I don't want to listen to this guy. I don't want to hear this guy and what he has to say. He's a bad influence. Well, I get it. I mean, I've heard that from people. Somebody wrote to me once and said, I heard you say that you did this to your wife, and I really had a problem with it because I wasn't sure to trust you, and I wasn't sure if you really healed, and are you just saying this stuff? And then he goes, but I listened to more of your episodes, and I realized that you have gone through a lot of healing, and you do talk as if you understand what you did, and it seems like you're very remorseful. And at the same time, I know it's an emotional trigger in me that I have to learn to trust people, or at least trust people again, so that I can continue to live my life without avoiding certain people. Because healing is possible. I've said this before, if the person that is abusive has empathy, healing is possible. But they have to have empathy. They have to really understand the pain and the suffering they've inflicted. They have to feel it as if it's their own suffering. They have to feel it as if it's their own loss. This is one of the key things that happened to me during my separation from my wife, is that I, for the first time, realized what she was experiencing because I put myself in her place. And when that happened, I saw myself in the mirror, and it was disgusting. And I'm having feelings about it right now. It was a disgusting reflection that was looking back at me, and I couldn't stand what I saw. And I'm so glad it happened. I'm so glad she kicked me to the curb. I'm so glad I had that revelation, because I wouldn't have the amazing relationship I have today. And the person I'm with today, believe me, she would not take that kind of behavior. She's been married to a sociopath. She's been with emotionally abusive people. And she is the first one to call me out on any behavior that might sneak up and make me take note. And I do take note. If it ever happens, it's very rare, thankfully. She always says, I'm so glad you're not that person anymore, because I wouldn't be with you. And I feel grateful that I'm not that person anymore. But I'm also very humble about it. In the sense, I mean, that doesn't even sound like a humble statement. It sounds like an egotistical statement. But I'm saying this from a humble place, that I still have little thoughts and little judgments that when they come up, I have to process. I have to figure it out. I have to heal from them. Fortunately, as you heal from being emotionally abusive, that happens less and less. So it's so rare that a negative thought or a toxic thought about doing something or saying something to her or loved ones in my life comes up, that I don't walk around in that constantly triggered state. I mean, when I was married, I was in a constantly triggered state. Why doesn't she do this? Why can't she do this for us? Why can't she see that she's causing all this suffering in our relationship? Why can't she change her behavior? That was my constant thought, always about her. Never about me. Why can't I become more accepting? Why can't I love her for who she is? I never asked those questions. Now I ask those questions. Now I make sure I live by that philosophy. And I'm sharing this with you because you could be on either side of the fence. You could be the abuser, you could be the victim, and I'm using those terms not to label you, but just to make it easy for brevity so that I can talk about this and give it some context. I want to make sure that you see both sides of it too. I want to make sure the person that you are and the person that you know, that you have some sort of understanding about both sides, about how both people can change, and how if the abusive person has empathy and they're willing to be humble and vulnerable and share things with you that are very deep and very painful and very scary, then that's a good first step for that person. But it does take a lot of soul searching, and it does take a lot of processing to get to the healing part when you're the abusive one, and when you're the victim of it. Healing takes place when you finally stop focusing outward, and this is for anyone listening, when you finally stop focusing outside yourself and focus on what you need to do for you. In fact, if you told yourself, I have no control over anyone, and when I try to control someone, it always backfires on me, so what do I need to do instead? I need to do something else instead. If you said that to yourself, whether you're the victim or the recipient of abuse, if you said that to yourself, you will start to change your life. You will start to find other healthy, resourceful ways to start to heal yourself, because the victim of abuse often wants the other person to change. And this is the dichotomy that happens, is that the abuser wants their partner or their loved one to change. But the victim of the abuse also wants their partner or loved one to change. So we spend so much time focused outside of ourselves. Why won't they change? And then one person deals with it aggressively or manipulatively or deceptively, and the other person deals with it sometimes the opposite way. They become more kind, more caring, more compassionate. They think that if they're nicer and nicer, that the person will eventually change. And the other person, if they become more deceptive, more calculating, more manipulative, that they'll change. I mean, it really gets mind-boggling, because both people are wanting the other person to change, and it becomes very difficult because neither one of them wants to go that route, because they're both focused on each other. So I packed a lot in this episode, but I wanted to give you sort of a bigger picture, a zoomed out picture of the typical emotionally abusive relationship, how it functions, how it operates, how one person's thinking, how the other person's thinking. And maybe if you have both of these perspectives, it can help you rise out of your shell. It can help you by giving you more knowledge and more information. It can help you to understand that some people are really just trying to do the best they can, and sometimes their best is the worst for you. It is awful for you, even though it's their best. That doesn't mean it will always be their best. They can get better. Doesn't mean they will, though. And so these are the things you have to keep in mind. Some people can change, some people will change, and some people won't. And if you've heard my other shows, I talk about how to tell if someone's going to change. And the easiest way to do it is to look at the history, look at the pattern, and follow the progress line and ask yourself if that progress line in our relationship is going up and to the right, even slowly. You know how you're in a boardroom and you see this profit and loss chart, and hopefully the company sees the profit going up and to the right, and year 1, year 2, year 3 going up and up and up. That is the sign of an increasingly profitable company, and the stockholders will be happy. I look at relationships in a very similar way. Let's look at our relationship. Year 1, what's that progress line doing? Okay, it's flat and it's going up a little bit. Great. Or it's going up a lot. What's year 2 look like? Oh, it flattened out or it went down. Or it continues to go up. Year 3, year 4. Or maybe you want to do it by the week or by the month. If you're in a real emotionally abusive relationship, that's going to be a week by week progress chart. And that progress you'll be able to see. I mean, this might be a good exercise for you. Just take a piece of paper and just draw this just to see it, although you can probably picture it. But you can see the progress line. Is it going up and to the right? Is it just kind of up and then flattened out, which is also good? There's nothing wrong with having that kind of middle point. Everything's going well. It could be better, could be worse, but hey, this is great. That's good. It keeps steady. Or did it go up and then down and then flatten out? And now it's down and you're kind of always in that heightened state of stress and anxiety? Or did it go up and then down and then continue going down, even at a slow incremental rate? Or did it never go up and it was always flat and then it went down? I mean, you just have to, whatever your chart is, whatever that progress line does for you, that's your history. That's your pattern. That's how you predict what's going to happen next. Is it 100% accurate? Of course not. But if you are wondering, well, should I wait? Should I stay? Should I go? Should I continue this relationship? Should I talk to them again? If you're having all these thoughts and you don't know how to make a decision, draw the progress line out. And you'll see that no matter what you did in the past, that's what happened. And if you have one of those progress lines that goes up and down and up and down, that's what's going to happen. So up and down is going to be the future. If it's flat, it's going to be the future. If it's down and continuing to go down, that's the future. And the only reason I tell you to use that, even though I cannot predict what will happen in the future, it's because sometimes that's your only guide, and you have to have faith in something. You have to have faith in the data that's already been presented to you so you can make a decision and stick with it. That's what needs to happen. Now, if the other person decides to change, if there is a revelation in one or both people, if there is better communication, if there is a reconciliation, and you've already made the choice to separate or stay away from each other, it doesn't mean your choice has to stick. I mean, I always say with marriages, for example, if somebody wants to separate, it doesn't mean the relationship's over. If somebody wants to get divorced, doesn't mean the relationship has to be over. If somebody wants to move 1,000 miles away, it doesn't mean the relationship has to be over. It might. It might be the thing that ends the relationship. They finally separate and now they don't talk to each other anymore and that's the end. It could be, but you can't rely on that. It just means that the relationship, whatever type of relationship it is, had to go through this change in order for change to occur. Because when you stay around someone that's toxic and the relationship continues along that progress line and it's not going well, then nothing ever changes. And it's better for you to believe what has happened in the past will happen again than to think what has happened in the past maybe won't happen again, because by believing that it will happen again, then you make choices that you stick with, you make decisions that you stick with, and let's just say that you decide to separate, let's just say that you decide to divorce, it doesn't mean it's over. Some people have gotten divorced and then gotten back together again. But healing had to take place. This is the only reason you need to stick to your decisions. If you look at the progress line and you make a decision based on that progress line, and you say, you know what, I'm just going to have faith in this decision no matter what happens, it doesn't mean that the decision you're making is final. It doesn't mean it's absolute. It just means it's a step toward healing that needs to take place. And who knows what's going to happen. But it's a lot worse than staying in a state of indecision. That's the point I'm trying to make with faith in the data that you have in front of you. You're either in a state of indecision for months or years, and you're not sure what to do, and you're not sure what's going to happen next, so you're giving it a chance, but every time you give it a chance, it goes one way, and then they're nicer, and then they're not nicer. I mean, there's all these factors and variables involved when you don't make a decision. So you're better off just making the decision, taking the steps, walking the path, and finding out what happens next. You can either stay in the rut of indecision, or you can make a decision, take the next steps, and find out what happens next. That's usually how things work. That's usually how to get the ball rolling. And if you've been in indecision for more than 6 months, it's probably time to make a decision. I mean, this is, of course, if you've done everything else you can. You tried therapy. You've tried talking to the person. You've tried working things out. It just doesn't work. So now you're in this space of, what do I do next? I don't know what to do next. If you're in that space, you're better off making a decision, even at the risk of being wrong, just so you can get the ball rolling. I want you to honor yourself and get the ball rolling if you're in this state, because that is the first step to healing. That is you honoring yourself to the fullest by saying, you know what, I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to step in. I'm going to make the decision. I'm going to make things happen. This is you telling yourself that. I got this. That's what a friend of mine told me once. He said, before I would go on stage for public speaking, I would get so nervous. I would get stressed. I would get all this anxiety. And I decided to tell myself, you know what, I got this. Don't worry. And he wasn't talking about himself. He was talking to himself, as if that scared little child in him didn't want to go on stage, and the adult stepped up and said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of this. I got this. I'll take care of us. Take care of yourself. Thanks for listening today, and share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. It contains a 200-point checklist to help you not only pinpoint the exact behaviors causing the difficulties in your relationship, but also clearly reveal to you why you leave so many interactions feeling bad. The workbook will help you make the next best relationship decisions for both of you. Use it to understand your own behaviors and how they affect those you love. Or even use it together to reveal the issues that you both need to work on. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant. Because you are. Thanks for joining me. We'll talk again soon.